Hi everybody, a lot of you asked me how to become a full-time wildlife filmmaker. So this video is specifically for you guys. Today I'll be sharing 10 tips on how you can become a full-time wildlife filmmaker. And make sure you watch till the end because I'm going to share 2 bonus tips which is surely going to help you guys. So let's get into it. Number 1, you have to be a very good naturalist before you even think of becoming a wildlife filmmaker. What does that entail? You need to understand a lot about wildlife, the species that you want to film or that you're interested in filming, and make sure you get as much knowledge as possible. That might entail picking up books and reading about different species of birds, mammals, or anything that you want to film. Number 2, that could also entail going out into a park, into a reserve, or even to a neighborhood park, observing the birds, understanding their behavior, and recording them on a piece of paper. Number 3, you can watch videos online, documentaries online, specifically some of my virtual safaris to understand how specific animals behave with people around them, especially if you're in a vehicle. Number 2, once you start learning about these species, it's time for you to start filming them. And you don't need an equipment like this. Even though we are professionals, we use something like this, which is the Sony FX6, and this is the 70-200 f2.8 lens. We're actually filming on the Sony FX3 with 24-70. You don't need equipment like this to start with. Once you're at a level which is professional enough, you have the money to invest in equipment, then you can buy something like this. But to start off with, even your smartphone is perfectly fine. Or if you want to go at a level beyond, you can even rent equipment, but of course you will incur some cost in it. Let's just say you're going to be using smartphone. Now it's time for you to start filming anything and everything you can. That could entail recording dogs in your colony. It could entail recording your friends and family. What's happening here is you're getting used to recording different people, seeing the angles, seeing how to frame them. If you have a professional camera and a lens, you can also try filming birds. Specifically in cities, you have so many pigeons all around, so many menas all around. Once you start filming them, you'll really understand what it takes to just be a wildlife filmmaker. Point number 3 is framing. Once you start filming your subjects, it is very important to know how to frame them and at what point to show the habitat versus a close-up versus an extreme close-up. So you try experimenting at initial stages, but after that you have to be very deliberate. So for example, when I'm in the field, if I'm seeing a tiger, I quickly need to decide, do I need to show its habitat or do I need to get a close-up? Most of the times, if the subject, maybe the tiger or any animal that I'm recording, any bird that I'm recording, if it's cooperative, what that means is if it's giving me enough time, that I actually usually zoom out the lens completely. I show the nice habitat, get the ambient sound, and then I cut that shot and zoom in. Then I get the nice close-up, maybe the reaction, maybe the bird is looking left and right, maybe it's chirping, maybe the tiger is licking itself. If the tiger is licking itself, I do have a normal close-up, but with the lick, then I'm gonna cut into an extreme close-up. You also have to remember about panning the shot. So for example, your subject gets up and moves to the right, then you have to ensure that you're moving the camera along with the subject in a very stable manner, so you're actually following the subject. But you can't follow it endlessly, right? You have to think of a storyline and let the subject leave the frame as well. So that is when we talk about letting the subject go out of the frame. So at one point you have to actually stop the camera at a certain angle, let the subject be in the frame, and then slowly let the subject walk out or fly out of the frame. Sometimes you might even predict a movement. Maybe there's a deer that's about to cross the road. You might just position your camera on the road and get the focus because you want that shot, right? You just want the deer to come into the frame, walk into the frame and leave the frame. That's a good establishment shot of the subject when it just gets revealed, shown, and then leaves the frame. So all of these things you have to keep in mind while framing your subject. Number 4 is focus. Focus is very, very, very important to any filmmaker. If your subject is out of focus, nobody can see it, right? So you have to make sure that the subject is crisp and clear. A lot of people don't know actually that most of the time wildlife filmmakers actually shoot on manual focus modes. That's because the subject is moving too fast, and also at points there are leaves in front and the camera's internal system is not strong enough to differentiate between the subject and the leaves or the foreground. So a lot of the times when you're using manual focus, you have to kind of keep changing the focus as the subject is moving. Again, when you are going back to step 2, where you just start filming and recording as much as possible, you can use this manual focus technique and get to understand, okay, if I move the focus to the left or the focus ring to the right, does the subject go out of focus, into focus? Is it further from me? Is it closer from me? When it's coming towards me, do I have to move it to the left or to the right? All of these techniques you have to be applying. Of course, if you're using a smartphone, unless your smartphone has a manual focus option, you will not be able to control the focus. But what I've realized is you can mostly tap on the screen on the subject and the camera will kind of automatically focus towards it. However, there is also one thing that we call pull focus. Remember when I was talking about framing and being deliberate about framing the subject? You can deliberately choose to make your subject out of focus. Maybe there is a kingfisher sitting on a water hole and beyond that there is a deer drinking water. You can choose to focus on the deer first and then pull the focus out of the deer and into the kingfisher. Or maybe to establish a shot, maybe you're saying that, oh, a tiger is laying in this grass. Maybe first the grass is in focus and the tiger is beyond the grass and the subject is not visible. The viewer cannot see the tiger. So then you can focus from the grass, tiger still being out of focus, and slowly into the tiger so that the grass becomes out of focus now and the tiger is in focus. What we kind of call a reveal shot. Tip number 5 is story. Every film contains a beautiful storyline, right? That's what keeps you going. That's what keeps you interested in the film. So here as well, whenever you start recording now, after you get used to making sure that everything is in focus and just playing around with the cameras, now you have to start focusing on telling a story. So you have to start thinking in terms of sequences. You see, whenever people like BBC or National Geographic are filming, or even when we go out filming, then we have to try understanding, okay, what are we gonna show as sequence? We don't go out into the field and immediately the tiger starts hunting and kills something. It's not like that, right? You have to think of sequences. Maybe the tiger is just resting. It's licking itself. Then maybe the tiger sees a deer. So here's a sequence of tiger resting, licking itself in 2 different sequences. Third, it sees the deer. It's now curious. Then the sequence comes of deer probably in the grasslands. Maybe there's a peacock in the grasslands. That is another sequence. Then after that, you have to figure out a shot where the tiger actually gets up. If in case you want to show the hunting sequence, the tiger gets up. That's another sequence. Then the tiger moves its paws. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's another sequence. And so on and so forth. Again, you don't have to focus only on the big cats. It's something that I do very regularly, so I'm able to tell you very easily about these sequences. But you always have to think of sequences in terms of stories. You can even think of stories which are about human-animal conflict. You can think of stories about conservation. You can think of stories about maybe you yourself in the field. But there has to be a certain beginning, middle, which we call the juicy middle, and then end. So in this case, if for example the tiger has hunted something, then the end would be the tiger dragging its kill into the bushes, or maybe the tiger has missed the kill, then the end will have to be tiger walking out of the frame. Similarly, when I was telling you about the deer shot, right? If you're talking about the deer crossing the road and just talking about in front of camera as well, you can always think of, okay, the deer enters the frame and leaves the frame. So that is a sequence in itself. Number 6 is get good at editing. You have compiled all this footage. Now what are you going to do with it, right? You can sit with an editor, pay them, and then create something off, or you can learn a software like Premiere Pro, Final Cut, or DaVinci yourself. There are so many resources available online, and then you can start compiling footage and start making a storyline out of it. A lot of the times storylines do not work in a linear fashion as we want it to. For example, the tiger footage I was telling you about, maybe you get the tiger licking on one day, maybe you get the tiger stalking on another day, maybe you don't get deer the way you want to get on a certain day. So all of this is now in your footage log in a hard drive or something, and now you need to put them together in a timeline just like this, move things around to make sure they flow in a nice storyline. With editing, you have to get good at color grading, at sound design, at cutting and pasting footages at the right places, and making sure that you are also fast at it, otherwise editing can take forever. One tip that works really good with editing is before you sit on the edit table, just go through all the footage that you have, create a log out of it, maybe on an Excel sheet or a notepad, and then write down what your sequence or what your story can look like. Point number 1, shot number 1. Point number 2, shot number 2. Point number 3, shot number 3. And these points that I'm talking about are essentially different segments of your story. Point number 7 is sound. According to me, there are 3 types of sounds that you need to pay attention to. Number 1, the natural sound you record in the field. For that, you'll need a nice mic. So you're recording the ambient sounds or the sounds of the subjects that you're recording. Number 2, the sound that you add during post-processing. Maybe there is a subject walking through water, but because the subject was too far, you couldn't add the water sounds. So you can add Foley sounds or water sounds in post-production. Number 3 is soundtracks. I use Epidemic Sounds to download songs and use them on my videos. I have to pay a subscription fee, of course. There are many open source libraries available where you can get the songs and not the songs, the music from or the soundtracks from. So these 3 things are very important, and now you need to know how to mix them, which is also a very essential part of editing. Point number 8, you need to start creating a show reel. Now that you know a lot about your subjects, how to film them, what to do during filming, frame them properly, and also edit all of this together, you need to start creating a show reel of the footage you've recorded so that you can present it to other people. A good show reel is something between 1.5 minutes to 3 minutes long, where it consists of the best footage that you've recorded and has exciting soundtrack in the background. Number 9, you have to put your work out there into the world. When I talked about show reels, you can't be imagining creating a show reel which is equivalent to something like what BBC, Nat Geo, or independent creators online are doing. They've been doing it for a very long time. They're using the best state-of-the-art equipment and have many different filmmakers. So make sure whatever you create, you are proud of it, it is authentic, and remember, it's only gonna get better. But whatever you've created, you have to put it out there. You're gonna get a lot of feedback from it. You can even send it to me at safarivithsuyash@gmail.com, and I would love to give you some feedback on it. But put it out there. Don't worry about people saying, oh, this is not good, this is bad, or what are you doing? Don't be worried about criticism. Just take it in and say to people, hey, this is my first try at becoming a wildlife filmmaker. I would love your inputs. That way, it'll serve as a good motivation for you guys as well. Number 10, start pitching your work to different companies and brands. However, before you can reach that level, you'll have to repeat the process 1 to 9 a few times to get really good at filming and capture something that is quite rare. Again, don't think that you have to go to a wildlife reserve to capture something rare, or you have to get that tiger hunting shot. Even in a city, you can find very rare wildlife that can create an amazing story. Did you know, for example, Delhi has 300 plus species of birds. All you need to know is how to find them, where to find them, and actually if you find a really rare bird within Delhi with a nice building in the background or even a trash pile in the background, that is a footage that can be used to tell a story of conservation, or about conservation rather. So use that to your advantage. Don't think of spending a lot of money and going into a wildlife reserve or a tiger reserve just to record sequences of tiger. Most people have that. So focus on something that is near you. Focus on something that can be rare and people are not doing. Use that footage now to start pitching to companies and brands, and that will go a long way in helping you pave a path to becoming a wildlife filmmaker full-time. Okay, here are your 2 bonus points. Bonus tip number 1, and it is pretty straightforward, which is you need to have a tripod. You need to make sure your footage is very stable because nobody likes watching a footage that is shaky, right? So make sure that even if you're using a phone, you use a small gorilla pod to make sure that the footage is stable. If you're using a professional camera, invest into a good tripod. Again, it doesn't need to be very expensive, or a fluid head, which are super expensive and most filmmakers use. It just needs to get the job done and make sure that the footage is stable. Bonus tip number 2, you have to create your own niche and style. Whether that comes into editing and color grading. A lot of people look at videos online and sometimes are very fond of different kind of color grading, you know, the off-whites and the saturations being down, or maybe the greens turned into yellows. Sometimes people are critical about it, but that doesn't matter. If it looks cinematic, if it looks beautiful, then that is your work. You're creating a niche for yourself. Similarly, in terms of recording something, don't go into things that people are already recording. For example, as I said about birds in cities, there aren't too many people recording birds in cities and how these birds live in cities. So try finding a niche and make it your own. That is what will make you stand out from the rest. So there you have it, guys. Here were your 10 tips to becoming a full-time wildlife filmmaker, along with 2 bonus points. Now, if you want to know something more, please feel free to ask me in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and please share this with your family and friends, or anybody that you think wants to become a full-time wildlife filmmaker. I've been putting a lot of content here on YouTube through which you can learn about wildlife, especially by watching my virtual safaris and the things that we're doing in Bandhavgarh National Park through Safari with Suyash. I would love to host you on a safari sometime, so make sure you reach out to me. And as always, thank you so much for your love, support, and I'll see you guys next time.